All right, well, for sake of time and for all of the discussion that we are hoping to have today, we can go ahead and get started. I am Kylie Carnes. I am the Circles Chair for the Women's Network here in Indianapolis. So pleased to be with all of you, especially as we embark on this time and are kicking things off for virtual events. We are joined by two amazing local organizations. We have WEthrive.live. The CEO, Rebecca Fleetwood Hessian, is here, as well as the CEO of IWL, Integrating Women Leaders. We have Kim Graham-Lee here with us today to give and to kick off this new series of events that we'll have for the next 7 weeks. So I'd like to kick it over to Rebecca first to give an introduction and to get things started.
Awesome. Thanks, Kylie. I'm going to jump over here and actually invite my friend Kim into the conversation. Kim, it's so great for us to be working together with Salesforce Women today. We've known each other for a while now and both are passionate about working with women. So I'd love for you to kick us off today if we could.
Great. Well, thank you. Rebecca and I were emailing yesterday about the last time we saw each other was at a Starbucks in person, and gosh, who would have thunk, right? No, it is truly a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you, Rebecca, and I certainly want to thank Salesforce, who is a tremendous partner of Integrating Women Leaders, IWL, of which I am the CEO of. I transitioned a few years ago from longtime board member with a 30-year career ahead of that. Just for those of you that may not know, IWL is a 501c3 headquartered here, 10 years old, and we're all about accelerating the advancement of women to drive individual and organizational growth and impact. And Rebecca, again, just a pleasure to be here with you too. You know, I'm really looking forward to learning from this Striving to Thriving series and was really asked to share a little bit of perspective about, you know, what's going on now relative to that. And to do that, and I'm going to call on Rebecca, this is going to be your toughest job of the day to help me with slides here. But if you put up the first slide, Rebecca, I want everybody to look at, actually the next one that has some letters on it. I want you to help me with what you see. I want you to capture what you see here. All right. So, and I see some faces there. If you click to the next, keep it right there. Click to the next slide. How many of you saw this? Opportunity is nowhere. Do I see any hands, or at least of the ones? Well, that's what I saw first. But what I'm wondering is how many of you saw this? The next slide. Opportunity is now here. Is that what the rest of you saw? Good. Well, you are exceptional already, because I will tell you, the first time that I saw this was about 20 years ago when I was involved in a training, and I've used this a couple times. And my first 20 years was with a marketing researcher, a global marketing research firm, so I love doing research. And most people saw what I did, that opportunity is nowhere. And I think, you know, in this middle, or maybe probably even the beginning really of this worldwide pandemic, it'd be easy to say that opportunity is nowhere. I mean, our world's turned upside down very, very quickly. But you know what? I truly do believe that opportunity is now here for all of us, individually, collectively, really to ensure that we as women leaders continue to strive and we continue to thrive. So no question, COVID-19 has really presented some very evident opportunities. So as shown on this next slide, the first opportunity is really more of a challenge in disguise. COVID-19 is likely to be a setback, or could be highly likely a setback and more challenging for us and gender equality overall. What's likely to happen, and there's been a lot being written about it, and I've been continuing to follow this, is that the pay gap that's still going to take decades to close is probably going to grow larger. And the net is women right now are being really overburdened, and inequalities that were already there, and in some ways progress that had even stalled and maybe was even taking steps back, those inequalities are only going to deepen. Because what's happening right now, more women are losing their jobs and being asked to reduce hours over the last 8 weeks than men. More women are in healthcare and on frontline positions, risking their lives. The stay-at-home responsibilities, I don't think I have to ask any of you that have children at home. And, I don't have children at home, but I'm dealing with elderly parents and grandchildren. And it's incredible the additional responsibilities this time has presented. And a lot of those responsibilities are falling on women. And I saw an article last week that even shared that women are having a much less favorable experience at home compared to men. And if history repeats itself, women are not going to rebound as quickly as men in returning to the pay that they knew before pre-COVID. So I think that's pretty eye-opening. Again, an opportunity in disguise, but we have some good news, as this next slide shows. The good news is that women leaders are being recognized for their strengths, and they're being recognized really on a worldwide stage. I've been talking about this and researching it for most of the last decade, in fact, that businesses today need the strengths that are considered more inherently feminine characteristics, and you see those listed there. And I don't know how many of y'all saw the Forbes article just a couple weeks ago, but these 7 heads of countries were recognized for the remarkable jobs that they're doing in dealing with the invisible enemy, the coronavirus. And in fact, it's been in recent years, there's lots of data about how women are driving financial results, being at the table. Well, these women are being very impressive by the low numbers that they're producing in terms of the number of cases of COVID-19 and even the number of deaths. It's really been remarkable. And if you aren't following the Prime Minister of New Zealand, you need to be. Jacinda she's awesome. She's empathetic. She's being very decisive. She's being very authentic and real, doing videos on Facebook in her Lee sweatshirt and talking about her own, challenges with children at home. She's built a lot of trust. So I think that is the real opportunity. The world is seeing what women bring, and particularly in this crisis. So to the women joined here today, I really want to thank you for being part of this, for being the leaders that you are. You're being leaders at home, in the workplace, your community, and our world, and we need that. So our opportunity is now here for us to be the change and to continue to strive and thrive. And Rebecca, I look forward to learning more about how to do that. So thank you again for having us.
Hey everybody, I'm Rebecca Fleetwood Hessian. I am the CEO and founder of a company called WEthrive.live, and we work predominantly with high achieving women. We got a few dudes in there, but mostly we work with women, and we care a lot about banning burnout, building community, and helping to boost business. So what we're going to talk about today, as we've looked at this sheltering in place, or whatever we're calling it these days, and talk about swimming in the sea of uncertainty, which has really been what it's felt like for the last several weeks, right? So how many of you, when this first started, thought, oh, that'd be kind of nice. Take a little bit of a break. I won't have to do my hair. I won't have to commute through traffic. At first, it might have seemed like, yeah, I got this. And then there were days that felt more like this, where you thought, what the hell is happening? How am I going to actually survive this? And so we're going to talk today about this idea of uncertainty has always been a part of our lives, but never more pronounced than it has been over the last 7 weeks. So I'm going to introduce you to the difference between striving and thriving as an entry point as we move into talking about what uncertainty really means. So we've been using the word strive as a moniker of success for as long as I can remember. But actually, the word actually comes from the word strife, which means battle and conflict. And so striving is about battling for the next thing, battling for something that feels right, battling for some validation of our success. Striving is when we're looking at some external factor, whether it's the promotion or the award or the neighborhood, whatever it is that's outside of us that says, I'm worthy, I've got this. And thriving is different. Thrive means to grow, prosper, and flourish. So we have everything that we need inside of us already to thrive. What we need to do is create the conditions by which we can thrive. So we're not waiting for some person or some external marker of success to tell us that we're worthy and we're enough. Now, thriving still is growing, prospering, and flourishing. I still want a growing career. I still want to make money, y'all. This is not some airy fairy woo concept that says I'm just going to throw it all away and give up on my career and go braid hair on the beach somewhere in Tahiti. Although that doesn't sound too bad. But we're career women. We want to work. We want to add value. We want to be relevant. And so thriving is a different way of looking at this career growth that says, you know what? You've got everything you need inside of you right now. So I'm going to look at the factors by which you can thrive in life and business. 3 keys to thrive in life and business are story, money, and rhythm. Now, we're going to talk just about story today. We're going to talk about you and your story. And the reason that I've chosen the word story to illustrate this fact is because we're going to look at the neuroscience of thriving, and our brains actually process information as stories. And so it gives us this opportunity to look at our story, but also to honor what our brain needs to thrive. Because every day when we wake up, our brain has one job. It wants to make sure we survive and thrive. And there are various points along the way that our brain is looking for, and I'm going to share some of those with you, all of those with you today. When we distill it down, the 2 factors we're looking for are reflection and connection. So remember those 2 things. You won't remember all of the things that we look at on the Thrive Continuum, but I want you to remember reflection and connection. So here are the steps. Every day when you wake up, your brain's like, okay, she's got to survive, and then I want her to thrive. And it starts with the basics: food, water, shelter, safety. Then it moves up into psychological safety, our emotions, belonging, our unique gifts and talents, our ability to connect socially in a way that we're generous and kind, so that we can start to derive some sense of value, status, and really ultimately arrive at meaning and purpose. And I said all that quickly. We're going to go into a few points of these in detail today, but remember, reflection and connection. So our brains are responsible for both the logic, the decision-making, as well as our emotions. And what has happened during this global pause, this sheltering in place, is everything about the habits, the back part of our brain, that were just kind of on a little bit of autopilot in the way that our routine would flow, how busy we were. Everything was disrupted abruptly. And so our brain processed this as trauma, because it's been trauma, y'all. It's like all of a sudden we've gone from busy, 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 how am I going to get it all done, to like we have just been thrown up against the wall in our living room, and we're laying there like, what just happened? So as you're thinking about uncertainty, and as you're thinking about it as it relates to the situation that we've been in, it makes sense that our brains are just a little scrambled right now. And it's hard to have very clear thoughts. And our emotions are all over the place. That's a normal response to trauma. So if you were to roll up on some kind of accident and you saw that someone was injured and had a traumatic experience, You wouldn't roll up and be like, hey, is your report due? You got your homework done? No. You would say, are you okay? How can I help? So one of the things that we're learning about ourselves and others during this traumatic time, because we're all experiencing it at the same time, is how very closely connected our choices about caring for ourselves are connected to our emotions. And so the first point that I want to bring up as it relates to, swimming in the sea of uncertainty, and both in this situation with COVID as well as moving into the future, is that self-care isn't optional. It's not something that we'll do when we get caught up. It's not something that we do that's frivolous. It's not bath bombs and booze, y'all. Self-care is literally taking care of our brains so that we can make decisions, we can recognize and manage our emotions. Self-care is imperative. And we're going to cover 3 other points today around uncertainty and our uniqueness. But right now I want to focus in on this: self-care is not optional. Prior to this global pause, I'm guessing that y'all had varying degrees of self-care in place. And now that we've been in this traumatic experience, there's this weird reflection time that can happen because we don't have all of the external distractions happening in our lives. And so I encourage you to take this experience that you've had with this time of reflection and remind yourself the connectivity between your food, your rest, and your emotions, and your ability to make decisions. Because there's a direct correlation. And I'm sure you've noticed, on those days that you're like, you know what? I've eaten everything in the house. The next day, it's even harder to have a clear thought, and our emotions are even more jumbled up. But when we care for ourselves, and this is not about shame and shade, y'all. Like, I'm not saying be perfect. I just want us to pay attention to the way that our emotions and our decisions respond to how we care for ourselves. You've probably also noticed that you're super tired, and it doesn't make any sense because you're not moving around much. Another response to trauma, but it's also reminding us that our brains are constantly speaking to us. Our brains are telling us what we need. And if we can pay attention to those things and rest when we need to rest and give ourselves high quality food, it will have a direct correlation to our ability to handle uncertainty, to our ability to handle and respond well to our emotions. So self-care isn't optional, it's required. All right, so the next step on the path to thriving is psychological safety. And psychological safety really is, do we feel safe with our emotions, our decisions, and our thoughts? Are we in a place where we feel like we can really belong? If I'm borrowing a phrase that Brene Brown has really made commonplace today among a lot of us career women. I mean, who doesn't love some Brene Brown? I know y'all had her at Salesforce recently, which I was able to log on. But belonging and psychological safety are right there together. So psychological safety, sometimes others threaten our psychological safety. Sometimes we've had a bad boss or a bad boyfriend or a bad situation that has made us feel like we can't express ourselves openly. We can't be ourselves. But oftentimes what threatens our psychological safety more than anything is how we talk to ourselves. And when this uncertainty creeps in, how we talk to ourselves is the first response. Before anybody else has a chance to weigh in, we talk to ourselves first. Now, here's the deal. Uncertainty has been a part of our lives forever. Now, of course, right now, it is more prominent than it has ever been. We've never been through this, which is why it feels so weighty and bad. But uncertainty has always been a part of our lives. Prior to the COVID situation, you could have had a terrible accident on the way to work. You could have gotten the call that someone you loved had been diagnosed with a disease. You could have gotten the call that someone had passed away. You could have fallen down and broken your dang nose. Like, every single day is full of uncertainty. But because our brains process information based on stories, oftentimes the other uncertainties in our lives, we've had some form of experience or know someone that's experienced a situation that we can call upon that gives us kind of a, okay, I know how to do this. But in this situation, none of us have ever been here before. So we don't have any precedent. We don't have any stories in our brain from our past experience or from somebody else's experience, and we can't Google, how do I handle COVID-19? Well, you can, but y'all don't. There's nothing good out there right now. We won't know how to handle COVID until 20, 30, 40 years into the future, when it's been studied significantly. Then we'll be able to know how to handle it. But everything else in our lives that's uncertainty, we've got some memory, some story in our brain that has helped us kind of deal with it. And when we talk about, that sounds scary, which is a part of uncertainty, fear is rarely the right word. Fear is physical and imminent danger. Now, for COVID, that's true. It's a virus. It is physical danger. But if you think about uncertainty in the broader terms, there's all kinds of other things that right now that we are uncertain about. We're uncertain about how school is going to be handled in the fall. We're uncertain about the economy. We're uncertain about lots of other things that really aren't the virus itself or physical danger. You know, if there's a tiger walking in your office, you should be afraid. But mostly what we feel that we call fear is actually uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen next. And when we're faced with that, our brains can't leave a blank. Our brains can't just be like, well, I guess I'll wait and find out. Our brains have to fill in the blanks with some story that we tell ourselves. So the first way that we deal with uncertainty is how we talk to ourselves. Anytime we're going to take a chance or make a change, the first responder is us and the story that we tell ourselves that fills in the blanks. You can probably read this on the screen, even though it's not complete. Our brain fills in the gaps. We create stories that fill in the blanks of uncertainty. Unfortunately, not everything that we fill in the blank with is accurate. But yet, we've created this story, and sometimes we just start to believe it. And so, to be able to deal with uncertainty, we have to be intentional and discerning about the stories that we make up in those gaps. But unfortunately, we all have what I call the little bitch in our head. We've all got that voice inside our head that's constantly talking to us. And oftentimes she just tells us stuff that's not true, especially when things are really risky and we're really making a big change or taking a big chance. She gets super loud. And she's going to be with us forever. We're always going to have this little bitch in our head. And my recommendation is that we personify her, like I've done a bit here, because she is always going to live with us. So it's best just to make friends with her. You can't out-career her. You can't outgrow her. She's always there. So my recommendation is to put her in the passenger seat or the back seat with a seatbelt and a snack, but she doesn't get to drive. You are going to be the one that drives. and she's going to whisper stuff to you, and you're going to say, girl, eat your snack. I got this. She's meant to keep us safe. We've all probably had an experience where we started to embark on something that really did have some sense of, we should be apprehensive. Like I've been in a situation, I'm a runner and I travel. I was in a situation in another city where I went to go for my early morning run, and I started to go into this park, and it was just starting to get daylight, and there was a weird truck parked in the parking lot, and there was a guy in the truck, and the little bitch in my head was hopeful that day because she said, girl, you ain't running here. Nope, get in your car, get back to the hotel and get on the treadmill. And I know that there was this voice that she was saying, don't do that served me well. But so often she also says things like, don't speak up in that meeting. That your idea is dumb. Don't do it. So we've got to be more discerning about when we listen to her and when we don't. Now, what happens when we fill in the blank with things that aren't true is basically we start to assume things. And you know what happens when we assume. So you can circle the first 3 letters and then the middle letter and then the last 2, right? Assumptions don't often go well, but we do have the opportunity to fill in the blanks with things that are far more optimistic than the gloom and doom that we can habitually kind of place in that blank. So a step to managing the sea of uncertainty, both now and past COVID, is to fill in the blanks with courageous optimism. Because just as much as some of the bad stuff that could happen, there's also some pretty amazing stuff that we haven't planned for that can happen. And that can be the real story that gets filled into that blank in our brains. So courageous optimism is my recommendation to feed your brain's need to thrive versus the gloom and doom. You know, there's all kinds of things that can be happening in my life in the future. And I like to imagine that things are going to go really well instead of fearing that they won't. Because our brains don't know the difference between fact and fiction. So if we believe that things are going to suck, our emotions start to respond to that belief. And our brain's like, well, she said it's going to suck. Our brains are just like little puppies to be trained, and we tell it something and it does it. It doesn't know the difference. And so when we courageously, optimistically fill in the stories of uncertainty, our brains are like, okay, it's going to be okay. And our emotions respond in kind. So we have so much more influence on our emotions than we give ourselves credit for. So again, the difference between striving and thriving is striving is something out there is going to give me the answer. And thriving is I've got a lot of the ability to create the answers and the emotions associated with them within me, within my brain, in my thoughts. All right, so if we're going to start just being courageously optimistic, we might as well start dreaming again. I know we were in survival mode, literally out looking for toilet paper and chicken breast. Like, yes, trauma. We have been in survival mode, and there's still a ton of uncertainty before us. But it doesn't prohibit us from starting to look to the future optimistically and starting to dream again. Because our dreams, our hopes and our dreams for the future also start to give us stories in our brains that we can look forward to. And again, our brain doesn't know the difference between fact and fiction. So if we start dreaming, our brains start looking for evidence that our dreams are true. And then all of a sudden we start getting the connections and the information we need to make our dreams come true. So our day-to-day busy only allows for incremental improvements. If we really want dramatic shifts in our lives, we have the power to create those. But we need to zoom out to a higher place and go back to dreaming. And if you want some help with this, I have a free download called Dream the Decade, which I created back in November when I thought that dreaming the decade was about this excitement of the next 10 years of our lives and everything that could be possible in 10 years. And I had no idea the application of it would be very different in 2020. But I firmly believe that the prompts and the questions in this document are more important now than they even were when I wrote it. So if you want to go to my website, WEthrive.live or dreamthedecade.com, you can grab that free download and start dreaming again and start filling your brain with some really optimistic, courageous stories. Now, the next spot that your brain is looking for in this path to thriving is your unique gifts, talents, and abilities. Our uniqueness is actually our superpower. Now, I want you to just let that sink in for a minute. It's not out there. Our superpower is within us right now. You, me, everyone has uniqueness all the way down to our fingerprints. Y'all, we were made very different on purpose. God was not into the die-cast manufacturing of humans. We are not machines. We are beautiful, unique human beings. And so recognizing our uniqueness is a key part of living in uncertainty, because too often uncertainty is fueled by comparison. And instead of comparison, I want us to reflect. I want us to look in the mirror and say, who am I and what do I need? Because normal is just a setting on the dryer. This idea that the answers are out there is what keeps us stuck. The answers are within us, but we first have to let go of the illusion that there is a normal. Because if I were to ask all of you to write down your definition of a normal career woman and hand them all in, and I were to look at them, they would be just as unique as you are. And so there is no standard when we're talking about people for normal or perfect or good and bad. And so if we can let go of that language, it certainly will free us up to be more of ourselves. I like the term not wrong, just different, to help us really stand tall in our uniqueness. And the same is true with our emotions and how we handle situations. And COVID-19 has really given us a spotlight on our emotions and how different we all have responded to this. If you're sheltering in place with people in your house, you've probably noticed this. Everybody's handling it differently. You know, my daughter is 18. She lost her senior year. It was traumatic for her, for me. She didn't leave her room for, I don't know, a week and a half. She was mourning the loss of something that she had looked forward to her whole life. Now my son is 22, he's a songwriter, a musician, he's outgoing, he's great, but he's also kind of an introvert, and he recharges and processes alone. So he didn't really feel the effects of this until like last week. He was perfectly content for many weeks, just kind of hunkering down, writing some music, doing his thing. We all have very different gifts, talents, abilities, emotions. And I want you to take this with you today. No one gets to pick how you feel. You have every right to your emotions in all situations. Own them. They're yours. They're unique. So uniqueness is our superpower. We're hardwired with gifts, talents, and abilities. And one of the greatest things that I get to do in my career as a coach is I get to help people uncover their unique gifts, talents, and abilities. I get to hold up the mirror and get them to see themselves in the way that they're truly unique. But what's really fascinating when this happens is I will say to these mostly high-achieving women, okay, so let's talk about your unique gifts, talents, and abilities. And they give me that long stare with the slow blink, like, not sure I have any. And then they'll say something like, well, I'm a good mom. I'm like, well, that's a role that you play. You should keep doing that. And then they say, well, I'm a good accountant. I don't know, making stuff up based on their job. And that's another role that you play, right? And I'm like, okay, keep doing that, but what makes you good at these things? So your unique gifts, talents, and abilities are deeper than your job description and the roles that you play. I'll give you an example of mine. My top 3. 1, I am ridiculously optimistic, as you can probably tell, but it serves me well in a lot of the roles that I play. The second one is that I'm a connector. When I meet you, I can't help but want to introduce you to 2 or 3 people that I think you should meet. And the third is I can take really complicated ideas and distill them down into metaphors or symbols or a simple way that you can process it, which makes me a good writer. It makes me a good consultant. There are parenting, there's all kinds of ways that I use that unique gift and talent. You have unique gifts and talents. And how we use those, when we're true to them, when we honor them, our brain says, yay, she's thriving. When we hide them, when we're afraid to use them because we're not sure if they're right or we're not sure how people will feel about them, that keeps us stuck in this place of uncertainty. Our gifts were meant to be given. So when we honor and use our unique gifts to serve another, boom, thriving. Our brain is just lit up saying, oh my gosh, you did a good thing. So in this time of trauma and uncertainty for COVID, our first response is often, I want to do something, but we're just not sure what to do. The best response is always to give from a place of your giftedness. So people were making masks. That's a great thing. I haven't used a sewing machine since I was a little girl with my grandmother. It's not my giftedness. Me going out to try to learn a new skill at a time that my brain is already in trauma isn't the best for me or anybody else. But what I could do is I'm a connector. And I noticed on Twitter one night that there were some career women that were sheltering alone. And it just broke my heart to think about being weeks upon weeks without anybody else in the house. And so I reached out and I said, hey, if anybody's sheltering in place alone, send me your information and I'll mail you a Badass Women's Council t-shirt which is my podcast brand. It may seem small, but it made me feel like I was doing something, and it's something that I care about, which is connection. I care about people that are isolated and lonely. And I derived great joy and great thriving from mailing out 15 or 20 t-shirts. And then when those women responded back and wrote them a little note and said, thank you so much, that's thriving. Another one of my clients said that she loves flower arrangements, to make them. And so when she was getting her groceries, she, contacted the Kroger floral department and made a deal to take a big bulk of flowers home. And she made little flower arrangements and dropped them off for elderly and healthcare workers that she knew. She was giving from her place of giftedness. When we're in a place of uncertainty and we're not sure how to respond, look within yourself first. What do you have that's unique? I promise you that when you give that as a gift, it will serve you as much as it serves the person that you give the gift to. Now, we're going to have to unprogram. Is that the right word? Probably not. We're going to have to let go of some things that we've learned in school if we're going to be able to do these things well. Unfortunately, school is based on a factory model. In fact, school as we see it today was created so that people would get to work in the factories quicker back in the industrial age. Prior to the industrial age, schools were about community and conversations and sharing ideas around religious beliefs and how the village works. And then when it went to the model that it is today, it was about efficiency and put everybody in a classroom and give them grades. And there's all kinds of things that aren't helping us in the way that school operates. So here are a couple of things that we need to undo if we're going to thrive and live well in uncertainty. Do you remember the feeling when you'd get the paper back, the one that you'd worked so hard on, that had all of the red marks of the things that you got wrong? That was the highlight. What did I get wrong, right? Well, guess what? We didn't spend very much time celebrating what we got right is one of the problems. But the second problem is it has led us to believe that there are tons of right and wrong answers. But as we move through life, the truth is there are a lot of right answers. So what keeps us stuck often is that we don't want to get it wrong. We don't want the teacher to put a red mark on our paper. There's got to be a right and wrong answer. Y'all, that's bullshit. It just is. When I started my podcast, I delayed my podcast months, almost a year, because I wanted to do it right. Finally, a good friend, coach, consultant who helps people with podcasts, Jen Eads, I call her my fairy pod mother. She finally said to me, Rebecca, it's your podcast. Do it however you want. I was 53 years old at the time. This was was I 53? Yeah, a couple of years ago. And I was freed to recognize that there are a lot of right answers. And we get stuck because we fear the red mark on our paper of getting it wrong. All right, here's another thing that school didn't help us with when it comes to thriving. We think that tenure is the right answer. You got to be old to be right. You got to have done it for a long time to know what you're doing. That's bullshit too. Because there are certain things that we are uniquely gifted and good at just because. And we can hone those skills certainly over time. But this idea that there's somebody that knows more than us that stands in the front of the class and gets to tell us what's right and wrong, and you have to have done it for a long time to be good at it, isn't true. And it keeps us stuck. It keeps us thinking we have to keep practicing. We have to go back to school. We have to get something else outside to bring it in. That's striving. When we think that the answer is somewhere else, and we got to go get it from somebody else, I'm not saying it's not great to go and learn from others. I've made a career out of learning and teaching people things. But too often, we have some great idea or the great decision or the right decision for us, and we're looking outside somewhere else to validate that we're right. When we get really comfortable with our instincts and the stories in our head and how we feel wired to be good at something, when we can trust that, trust our gut. Our gut is another story in our head. It's that, I think this is right, but nobody's told me if I'm right or not. I probably shouldn't say it until I go get more information. That's not always serving us well. Sure, I know people that just spew out whatever's on their mind constantly and they aren't right often. There's always both ends of this spectrum, right? But what I'm saying is trust your intuition, trust your gut, trust some of the stories that have been embedded in your brain as uniquely gifted. Start to trust your gut. It wasn't honored very much in school, was it? You couldn't say, hey, I don't think that's the right answer. I don't really know why, but I just have this gut feeling. Teachers didn't like that. But you know what? My instinct in business has been one of my superpowers. I have a good gut when it comes to business. And when I learned to lean on that, I started making more money and helping my clients in a much more genuine way. So start to trust your gut. Okay. While we're talking about connection, I said it is important to learn from each other. Share information is critical to our brains, what it's looking for to thrive. So let's look at the difference between marbles and puzzles. So let's picture that you have a handful of marbles. They're all, look at them, they're all round and shiny and perfect. They're beautiful. Now, if you were to take this handful of marbles and turn it over on a table in front of you, what would happen? They'd all roll away. Because perfection doesn't stick together very well. But puzzles are different. If you were to take a handful of puzzle pieces in your hand, handful of puzzle pieces. If you were to take these puzzle pieces and you were to look at them, each of them very different, with their jaggedy ass edges and dirty from the dust in the bottom of the box, hardly, not even close to perfect, unique. And you were to take those puzzle pieces and you would turn those over on the table in front of you. And then you would very intentionally start to look at how they fit together. And click, click, click. You start to put these unique pieces together. There are two characteristics of a puzzle once it's put together. One is it's far more beautiful. And the second is it's far stronger when each of those unique pieces are clicked together to form this beautiful picture. Your uniqueness matters. Your struggles matter. Everything about who you are matters. But when we try to polish ourselves up and make us more perfect before we take ourselves out into the world, there's no place to connect. When we're trying to be like everybody else and copy what we see on social media, there's no place to connect. Our uniqueness is the key to connection. Reflection of our uniqueness is the key to connection. Owning our uniqueness is what helps us connect. Reflection and connection. The kindest thing that we can do is to show up with our unique gifts and talents ready to serve another. Because when we show up with our unique gifts and talents, it says to our brain, you are valuable, you are relevant. We don't have to wait for some external force of striving to tell us. We know when we have served from our place of giftedness. That's what lights us up in a meaningful way and gives us another story to log in our brain that says, yeah, that was good. Keep doing some of that. So the final point around uncertainty and how to swim in this sea of uncertainty is nobody thrives alone, which is what has been so hard about this time of sheltering. It's been traumatic. And even though we've got these Zoom calls and we've got the opportunity to jump on and do a happy hour with our friends, we don't get that same kind of biological feedback that we get when we're eyeball to eyeball and heartbeat to heartbeat. We need physical connection. It's a key part of our brain's ability to thrive, but it's also about showing up with all of your uniqueness and connecting with another intentionally, finding out how those puzzle pieces fit together so that we can be stronger and more beautiful. Connection matters. All right. Speaking of connection, y'all, I so wish we were in a big room together and we could just be chatting and talking through this whole thing. But I would love to stay connected because life is messy. And when we stay connected, we can start to see how beautiful some of those messes really are. And I'm guessing that there's been some beautiful moments even during sheltering in place and the global pause of COVID-19. And I hope you'll take those with you and continue to share those with each other. Reflection and connection. I'd love to stay connected. I have a podcast called the Badass Women's Council. I'd love for you to listen. I'd love for you to give me feedback. You can also connect on Instagram, Badass Women's Council. I share stories and ask questions and love interaction. And I also have an online community called badasswomen'scouncil.community that is for career women to find each other and find meaningful connection. So I'd love to connect with you there. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to the next several weeks where myself and some of my Thrive guides from WEthrive.live will be digging in deeper to these topics that take us from striving to thriving. Thanks so much. Make it a great day.